I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Rita Bullwinkle to talk about her novel Headshot. In Headshot, 8 young female boxers compete over a hot July weekend at Bob's Boxing Palace in Reno, Nevada. The novel is divided into matches between the boxers, and it details the fighters' physical matches, along with their personal backstories, with a focus on their backgrounds, unique personalities, and inner struggles. Now, I have to be honest, I'm not a boxing fan, and quite frankly, I don't understand much about the sport, but I did play soccer and netball during my school life, and I'm a fan of many different sports, and even though boxing is not one of them, I was able to connect with this story very much. And it's definitely one of my favorite stories I've read this year. So I think if you played sports competitively, have children in sports, or just a sports fan yourself, I think you'll appreciate this book too. But before we get into the episode, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast so you can know when new episodes are uploaded. Leave the show a 5-star rating. It gives me that extra nudge of encouragement. And write me a review if you love the show. Now, if you don't like the show, that's a different story. But if you do love the show, it's a great way to help support the podcast. Also, if you want to get in touch with me directly, if you want to share your thoughts on the last book you've read, if you love this episode, if you've read Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, I'd love to hear from you. And you can also just ask away any question that's top of mind. So click the link at the top of the show notes that says, send me a text with your thoughts, and I'll share some of the messages with you on air. So thanks in advance. And now onto the episode with author Rita Bullwinkle. Hi friends, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her novel Headshot is author Rita Bullwinkle. Hi Rita, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hi Victoria, thank you so much for having me.
Yay, I'm so excited to talk about your new novel. But before we get into things, how are you feeling? This is your debut, Headshot. What's the experience been like so far? How are you feeling? Are we excited? Are we nervous? Just tell me all about it.
Oh, I feel totally effervescent. It's been dreamy and lovely and really exciting and just an otherworldly joy to have people finally encounter this world that I've spent so much time in alone.
I'm excited that you're here so we can chat more about it. So I want them to hear it straight from you first before we talk about the characters involved in this novel. So tell us about Headshot. What's your elevator pitch? But also, what can readers expect when they pick up your book?
Yeah, Headshot is about a youth women's boxing tournament in Reno, Nevada, and the really strange and electric ways that the playing of games has the ability to form a collective memory. The book is structured as a series of face-offs as a tournament bracket where there are 8 main characters, all young women boxers, and each section in the book is a match. So you meet 2 women as they are pitted against one another. And I guess my great hope for what readers experience, what they could expect, is that I really aspired to write a book that felt like what it feels like to play a sport, what it might feel like to be in a boxing ring. I feel like there's been a lot of literature written about what it feels like to watch a sport, but my hope is that a reader would experience what it feels like to play a sport and what it feels like to box with the book. So that would be my greatest hope.
Yes, I think I actually connected to this, especially because of the sporting element. So growing up, I played soccer. I said football when I was in school, but soccer for my American friends. And I really enjoyed it, but it was such a collective effort. You're so intertwined with your team members. And I couldn't help but while reading and hearing the stories, specifically as we're watching the match play out through the pages, but also getting the backstory of each girl in the ring, I couldn't help but reflect on my sporting days with my team, though very different. But those are very vivid memories for me. Do you have a background in sport? What was your memories like? And was this intentional, kind of sharing the collective nature of just sporting activities, both on an individual level, but also together, kind of like a team?
Yeah, I am not a boxer. I don't have a background in boxing, but I was a competitive youth athlete in a number of sports. Most successfully, I was the co-captain of a Division I water polo team and participated in the Junior Olympics 7 times. And many of the women that I played with into my early 20s went on to play in professional leagues, to go play pro in Australia and Greece, where they have professional leagues for women's water polo. And so I was drawing from this space of the tournament very much from life. The idea that my weekends as a young adult were really structured around traveling to these far out parts of the country to meet another me, to physically face off against another young woman, and what those tournaments felt like and looked like, and even the architectural spaces that they took place in. While in my own lived experience, they weren't boxing gyms, the feel of them, I think, has the same texture as what's in the book.
Wow, I can actually really see that. And I just have to say for my listeners, just in case you're not familiar with water polo, because I am, it is a pretty tough sport. It makes soccer seem like child's play.
It is. Yeah. Some people I encounter immediately know a lot about the sport, and others don't. I'm a native of the San Francisco Bay Area in California, where it's an incredibly popular sport to play. So I really grew up being, every public school has a program and a training program, and that was the context within which I began to play it, much like hockey, except for with none of the protective gear, or there's like a foul system in water polo where if you hit someone hard enough, you have to go in like a timeout box. And that's just to communicate the kind of like physical brutality, like you are physically touching other people, you are like using your body to wrestle against them in the water. It's a very, very physically contact driven sport, in that you are often measuring like the physical strength of your own bicep while against another person's, while being like locked in with them.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're very kind in your comparison. See, I would say football, the NFL, is like a cousin of rugby.
Yeah.
And I think water polo is rugby, but you're in water. Think of American football, think of physicality, because the NFL, I've gotten into it. I have boys, and my husband, who's American, he taught me, the game, which I'm a quick study because I grew up in a sporting family. But yeah, very aggressive game. Everyone listening, I'm going to assume the NFL. Think of the physicality and just the energy that these players display on the field in water. And it's a very physical sport, water polo. So I can see, even though you weren't in boxing is also incredibly physical too.
Yeah. And this is reminding me, Victoria, about how you alluded to this with one of your previous questions about how, while like the setting of this book is a boxing tournament, the narrator goes into the minds of these young women, all 8 of them, and makes reference to memories of many other kinds of sports and many other types of games. So lacrosse and tennis are mentioned as touchstones. Swimming is mentioned as a touchstone. There's also a lot of children's games that are mentioned, like diving for rings. And there's a whole long section on girls hand clapping games. These ideas of the collective play and what that might be about is totally something present in the book.
Absolutely. Collective play, because I think that's what I connected with is just my memories as a young girl in school and playing different sports. I excelled at soccer, but I had my hand into different things. And you do feel that collective spirit when you're playing, but especially as an adult, long removed from all that, I still have very vivid memories of my experiences. So with that said, I want us to talk a bit about the women, the girls who competing in your novel. So we have 8 young boxers. They're competing over a weekend in Reno, Nevada. The novel is structured into matches, and I actually liked that. So I have my copy here with me, and the first matchup I have here is Artemis Victor versus Andy Taylor. So Artemis is from a family of fighters. I wrote that in my notes. Andy is carrying a lot of trauma and baggage from an incident that occurred at a community pool where she was a lifeguard. So tell me about this matchup first off, Artemis and Andy.
Yeah, that's where we begin the book, is with these two characters. Artemis is a legacy. She's someone who has a lot of advantages because she grew up in the sport. Her sisters played it. Her oldest sister, Star Victor, actually won the tournament several years ago. So she's been living in kind of the world of youth women's boxing pretty much her whole conscious life. Whereas Andy Taylor is someone who fell into the sport and doesn't quite know why she's there. And her mind, while she, like, one of the reasons why I think she loves the sport and while she loves boxing is because the act of doing it unlatches her mind from like a normal mode of thinking, which is why it during the match drifts away from the action that's actually taking place. Sometimes I imagined the consciousnesses of these young girls during the match as almost like balloons tethered to their heads that were floating above them, bobbing around, that occasionally would come closer down to the physicality of the match, but then float way up high into remembered pasts or possible or definite futures. I really wanted each section in the book, including the first section, to be an attempt at portraiture, which is part of the nod with the title. This idea that a headshot is a boxing term when you hit someone in the head, but it's also this idea of a portrait of someone when you look closely at their face, or like a simulacra for the rest of their body, this idea that someone's face represents everything about them. And in each match, I wanted to attempt a literary version of that, of what would it look like to paint a portrait of 2 young women at a time, and to also paint a portrait of 2 young women at a time where the 2 young women who are projecting their interiority upon one another can't speak to one another. Obviously, in a boxing match, the participants are wearing mouth guards. They are physically very intimate with one another, but not linguistically.
Right, absolutely. And the next pairing I want to highlight, because I want to go down the line, is Rachel and Kate. So I found Rachel interesting because Rachel is that athlete who has like a trademark piece of clothing that they wear to every match. In this case, it's a raccoon skin hat, which of course an opponent sees that, they're like, what is this going on? But then we have Kate, who is more, in my opinion, like a softer, more posh girl. She's very brilliant. I feel she thinks a lot. She's in her head a lot. I know we're just talking about having thoughts separate apart from the physicality of the match. But we have this matchup, Rachel, who has this trademark hat she's always wearing, and Kate, who in my opinion is a bit more softer, posh kind of girl. Tell us about this pairing.
Yeah, I have such affection for them both. Yeah, Kate Heffer, she's just very regimented. And that's where her talent comes from. She is very good at following directions. She's also very good at structuring time around herself, believing, I think there's a point in the book that says that she believes that time exists for her to walk through it, which is a really powerful thing to be able to think. This idea that the world exists for you to experience it. And I think it can at times make someone a very good competitor. It can certainly, it gives someone an air of entitlement, this idea that everything that's happened is there for you to experience. Whereas Rachel DeRico has this energy almost of oftentimes, I think Italian mob bosses sometimes say you have to be willing. The only way you'll ever win anything is if you feel open to the idea of losing everything, putting everything at risk. And that's the way Rachel DeRico boxes and thinks. She puts her whole body, her whole self at risk all the time. And one of her protective mechanisms in the way that she exists in the world outside of the boxing ring is that she has this thing that kind of comes to define her in the book, which is her weird hat philosophy, which is the idea that if you act and dress in a way that society can't understand, that you gain separation from society, but you also gain a sense of power. That like by being unpredictable, by not conforming to dress standards or any other standards really of what society thinks you should do, that you gain a real sense of power over people. And that's how she walks through the match and walks through her life.
I think I found Rachel the most interesting because she's quite an odd cookie, but I think I love that about her. And you're absolutely right. She puts her entire self into it. And I think I appreciated getting to know Rachel. But then we have a cousin duo. Right? They're cousins, right? Yeah, they're cousins. Yeah. Izzy and Iggy Lang. Now, I have to tell you, when I saw that they were related, because I'm in my now learning the NFL era and I watched the entire past season.
Wow.
And I understood it. Because here's the thing, I started late last season. So that would have been the 2012 that started in 22. Yeah. So I started really late, but I did see the match. It was near the final, I think. Or it was the final where you had the Kelce brothers facing off.
Oh, right.
Yes. And I found that very interesting. Two brothers, again, Iggy and Izzy are cousins, but just two brothers facing off. The families there supporting. But in the case of these cousins, they have a family rivalry going on, but there's also lots happening between these two. So tell me, one, about your decision to put cousins together fighting and what's going on with these two characters and their matchup.
Yeah, Iggy and Izzy Lang are from Douglas, Michigan, and I wanted to have two cousins in the tournament because it felt true to my lived experience as a competitive youth athlete, where there were these families that it made sense if their parents signed them up for the same thing. They could coordinate on carpooling to practices. It just was this idea of people within the tournament being related to one another seemed true to my experience of the way youth athletic tournaments were in my memory. And I wanted to have them face up against each other in the beginning because it was such a letdown, right? Like they practice against each other all the time. They're from the same region. They're from literally the same gym. And to take away that anticipation of that, and it does happen sometimes, right? Where the tournament gets scrambled and you have no control over it. And Iggy is older. In that match, they both have access to, they're the only boxers that knew each other before the match begins. So that section in the book is the only part that has a shared pre-match memory and also shared future memories, right? There's a section in that match where you fast forward to a family picnic far in the future, and where one of their parents is dying. So you see how the future of their family exists a little bit, just in a very small flash. But that is unique in terms of the 8 main characters of the book.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That family matchup sometime, they're inevitable. So you might see them in one sport or another. And then we have the last matchup. So we have Rose Muller and Tanya Ma. Now, Rose seems a bit more spiritual, whereas Tanya gave me Caitlin Clark vibes. I don't know if with women's basketball.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark seems to be like, this
superstar. Yeah.
Yes, superstar, destined for stardom. I also love my Angel Reese. Okay, so
Yeah,
definitely
of
going to
course,
shout
of
out
course.
Angel Reese here.
She's amazing.
She is amazing too. But when I was reading, I felt more Caitlin Clark vibes with Tanya, and because it seems like she was destined for stardom, and then versus Rose, she's more a spiritual person who grew up with religion but is like turning away from it, and just her approach to fighting is very different. So tell me about this matchup.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting that you read Rose as spiritual. I do. She obviously, a lot of her character is centered around the fact that she's from Texas. She grew up Catholic. She looks at the kind of expected nature of a boxing match as similar to the expected nature of mass. The idea that there are these rote things that need to happen, right? The structure itself is the same every time. So she draws on a lot of memories of growing up in the church, although I think she herself is extremely skeptical of organized religion. And at one point, even pretends to pray in an effort to look at her fellow competitors in a way that hopefully she can learn something while they think that she's not doing anything. So she even uses this perception that people think that she's religious kind of to her own selfish advantage. And Tanya Ma is from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And a lot of the portrait I drew of her revolved around how she doesn't know it at the time of the match, but she'll actually grow up to be a very successful elderly actor. Like she'll become like a typecast grandmother, and she'll have this whole other life as an actor. And how in the height of that success of her acting career, very late in her life, she, or some like remnant of her conscious, wonders if the thing that made her one of the best boxers in the country is also the thing that made her a very good actor. So, and we also get a lot of Tanya's memories of her childhood, like Andy Taylor. Her mind, when it becomes untethered in the match, is like unable to not remember the day that her mother left her family and left her father and her sister. So there is this element of Tanya Ma like not being able to not think about something while she's boxing.
Okay, awesome. I love hearing your insights on the characters, especially after my perception of them just as a casual reader, just reading it and forming my own opinions. Another thing I think worthy of mentioning here is that the book is separated into matches. So we went down each matchup. But while we're watching a match, so you're highlighting the actual gameplay, blow by blow, we also get their inner thoughts. We also even get thoughts of the people around them, like the coaches, family members, and the spectators that are actually there. Tell me about your decision to just give this, in my opinion, a crow's eye view looking down on just all the happenings over this tournament weekend.
Oh, Victoria, I'm so glad you used that term crow's eye view, because that's totally what my intention and hope was that the narration of the book, and therefore perhaps the reader could feel like they were like hovering above everyone and looking down in a way that maybe felt physically impossible, or some type of there has to be some type of suspension of disbelief that you can look at a tournament from above. So that was totally my intention. I think that speaks to is the fact that I was thinking about the book as, I eventually landed on this term as not quite realism. It's not that magic is specifically happening, but there are parts of the book that are surreal, or that require one to at least entertain the possibility of the surreal, or the possibility that you could look at something and hover above. Yeah, I'm so glad you had that reading.
I really felt that. Again, your intention, I love when the reading experience kind of lines up with the intention in a way. So I'm curious, real quick, what was your inspiration? What made you decide to write Headshots? Again, where did the idea come from? Clearly, you drew on some of your experiences as an athlete, as a student athlete, but where did the idea for the novel come from?
It really came from those memories about me having these like troves and troves of memories of going to hundreds of tournaments over the course of my childhood and remembering back to a time that was at this point 13, 14 years in the past, where so much of my life was structured around training and around making my body pretty much as physically powerful as I could. And I have a real sense of bafflement about that, about trying to understand what I was doing. And the book really was born out of that.
Awesome. Awesome. It's really good to know. When I looked back to see, okay, I devoured this book, I want to know what else is Rita writing. I saw that you had a story collection. I love short fiction. So I was really excited to see that. I haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but I will. But just in case our listeners are interested as well, tell us about your story collection, Belly Up, and what can readers expect in that one?
Oh, I'm so grateful that you looked that up, Victoria. Yeah, it is a short story collection that has many different short stories in it. I think, and now I think there's 18. It's quite a lot. And what that kind of just speaks to is that some of the stories in the collection are very short, exist in just a page or two, and some are very long and approach novella length. And many of them circle ghosts or family meals. They all ask these questions of what does the body need to be sustained, and where is the border between life and death? That's something that kind of pops up frequently, is characters who are existing at that border or traversing back and forth. Some stories in that book I think people would read as very realist, and are completely unreal. There's a story in the collection called Concerned Humans where the protagonist is a speaking snake. Yeah, I'm so curious to know how readers see the relationship between the books. I really think of them as being sisters, but of course that's for each reader's own individual experience.
I'm excited because I'm seriously a fan of short fiction. I think they're great. So I'm looking forward to reading that. But I want to get into your reading life real quick, because even though we're here to talk about headshots, we just learned about Belly Up. I want to know what you're reading. So share with our listeners the last book or books you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Yeah, the last book that I had never read before and finished reading and just moved me so greatly that I walked around changed for days is Terrace Story by Hilary Lecter. It is about a couple that lives in New York that is on the precipice of having a child, and they, in anticipation of the child, have to move apartments, and they live in these increasingly smaller spaces. And the wife and the couple, with their young baby, and the wife and the couple discovers that every time she invites one specific coworker over to their apartment, that one of their closets, when you open the door, becomes this like beautiful terrace garden. So the book is structured around this whole kind of dreamlike disbelief of space. Tons of propulsive chaos and tension go from there. Something about that book that I really admire. I read Hilary's book after finishing Headshot, but both Hilary's book and my book end it literally in outer space, which is a fun connection maybe between them. So Terrace Story, oh my gosh, totally would just 10 out of 10 recommend. I also, in anticipation of our conversation, I brought my like bedside table books. Yeah, they're my like extremely fresh bounty from book tour. I just yesterday came back from like a 6-city book tour. So these are my just acquired, and I'm super excited to start books. A book that everyone's talking about is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I love his poetry. I'm really excited to start that. And then I also picked up Worry by Alexandra Tanner, which is Tanner's debut novel. I am the editor at McSweeney's Quarterly and recently had the expected but devastating experience of Tanner had submitted a story for the Quarterly, and it had been sitting in a slush pile for a long time. And I finally came up into my queue to read, to consider, and I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my goodness, we have to publish this. And so I emailed her agent, and sure enough, it had already been picked up somewhere else. So I'm greatly anticipating really loving her novel, because this short story was just absolutely incredible.
So I have to interject real quick to say the book is phenomenal. It's so good. I read it. I loved it. And I've been recommending it to readers as well.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Victoria. Now I'm beginning tonight. Amazing.
So good. So good.
And then I also got A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. I don't know if it's an old book. It's been out for a long time. Maybe I'm checking right now. I think 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, not horribly long, but my feeling about Radden Keefe is like the hype is real. He's one of our best nonfiction writers, and his short pieces, which I encounter in the New Yorker often, and his book-length work, Empire of Pain, I found really carefully meditated. So that's what's on my to read.
Awesome. What was your favorite childhood book that you can remember?
My favorite childhood read. I wasn't that big of a reader as a kid. Or to put this actually a different way, I was a compulsive reader when I was very young, but of really unliterary texts. I am pretty sure I read every Nancy Drew book that ever existed, which, they're written by ghostwriters. I think at my childhood time, there was like 214 of them. And I remember it being this kind of burden. Like, I was such a hopeful completist that I was like, well, this is my thing. I guess I have to finish this, and being by the end of it, like so bored by the like repeated structure of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But then this thing happened to me where I was like educated in a large public school system here in California, where the literary texts that we encountered in school, it was almost as if by the time they reached the public school system, the texts were so non-threatening that they were like nearly irrelevant. And so I actually really, for the vast part of my childhood, really grew, or the horrible thing that would happen is you'd have to read like an excerpt of a book, which never made any sense, and then analyze it in multiple choice or something. So I really, in my childhood, I grew up feeling like maybe I didn't like books. It really wasn't until I got to college and encountered like contemporary literary fiction that the medium really shook me and changed me. Because I feel like this is a non-answer, I have a toddler who I read with a lot. The series that I most love reading with my daughter is the Chiri and Chura series, which are originally written in Japanese, but they're translated by the amazing translator David Boyd, who translates a great deal, along with Sam Bett, of Miko Kawakami. But Chiri and Chura are these like two young girls. They have bikes and they go under the sea. They go in a garden. They like go out at night. They have these beautiful adventures, and the illustrations are so lush and beautifully illustrated and fun. And those are some of my favorite things to read with her.
Oh, I love that. That is awesome. So on the show, we also love indie bookstores. So share with our listeners your favorite local indies.
I am so glad that you've asked this, Victoria. I just bow at the feet of all independent bookstores and all independent bookstore booksellers. They're all incredible. I feel totally spoiled and lucky that here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have just an embarrassment of riches. Perhaps most famously, we have City Lights in North Beach, which is absolutely fantastic. I live very close, like an 8-minute walk away from Green Apple Books, which is an incredible San Francisco bookstore. Booksmith on Haight Street is also amazing. We just have Book Passage, which has both a Ferry Building location as well as a Corte Madera Marin location. We just have so many incredible favorite indies that, forgive me, I couldn't name just one.
I know we love our indie bookstores here, so we're always happy when authors can share the indie love. Getting back to your book, though, Headshot, and wrapping things together, I know you've alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation, but what are you hoping in an ideal world that readers might think or feel after they've turned the very last page, after they've met all these 8 girls and just get this, in my opinion, fabulous bird's eye view of a competitive boxing weekend in Reno, Nevada?
Oh my gosh, Victoria, thank you for talking about the book with such incredible elegance and grace. My hope is that if you have a background in boxing, if you are a boxer, that you would see authenticity in the book, but that also if you're any person of any gender identity who has ever been obsessed with doing something that you haven't quite understood, and especially been obsessed with doing something collectively with someone else, that you might see yourself and see a past self or even a present self, perhaps, in these pages.
I hope they will too. I for sure reflected on my teenage sporting years very fondly, even though it was soccer and had nothing to do with boxing. But Rita, I appreciate you taking the time and coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, Victoria, it's been such an honor. I just love the Reader's Couch so much, and it's such a joy to be on.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.